All right, the fallout continues, and I think for some of us it's kind of remarkable and deeply encouraging that this fallout over Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg is still sending shockwaves. He sent this letter regarding the pressure that he and his company received from the Biden administration to censor speech that didn't fit the administration's narrative or cause. Now, while so much of the attention in all of this has been given to how Facebook put their thumb on the scale when it came to the 2020 elections, the impact that the Biden administration's pressure had on our country's approach to COVID should not be lost in this whole debate and discussion and investigation, especially when we have bureaucrats like we have at the World Health Organization who were just itching to have more control over our lives with any future pandemic that might just happen be right around the corner. So now that the cat's out of the bag, the question is whether or not we're going to be any wiser moving forward. And joining me now to talk about this is Dr. Bhattacharya. He's a professor of health policy at Stanford University and one of the authors behind the 2020 Great Barrington Declaration, which advocated for alternative approaches to COVID-19. Dr. Bhattacharya, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always an honor to have you, sir.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, you were unquestionably one of those who was on the tip of the spear in many ways during the pandemic. And you were saying things that other people like Dr. Fauci were frankly trying to shut down. Remind us of what we saw social media platforms doing during that pandemic.
So I wrote that Great Barrington Declaration with other authors from Harvard and Oxford. Tens of thousands of doctors and epidemiologists signed it. When we put the petition online, Facebook and Google both suppressed it. Like you couldn't post it. Google downplayed the rankings of it. Later, when I joined Twitter in 2021, I was put on a blacklist, which I found out when Elon Musk bought Twitter. And in the Missouri versus Biden court case that I'm a plaintiff in, the discovery in that showed direct emails from the White House itself, the Surgeon General's office, the CDC, to Facebook, ordering them effectively to censor my ideas. Or ideas like what I would like to be put out.
Incredible. And so many of us during that time, I know we were hit with it. We were not on the tip of the spear to the extent you were, but we were shut down, and many of us. And, you look at this, censoring speech in and of itself is horrifying and is bad enough and is un-American. But when silencing speech that could have been helpful during the pandemic is shut down, that even goes another step, don't you think?
Oh, Jody, it was terrible. It wasn't just me, of course, that was shut down. It was, as you said, millions of Americans were shut down. They tried to create this illusion that there was consensus behind the school closures, consensus behind the mask mandates, consensus behind the vaccine mandates, consensus there were no such thing as vaccine injuries, that the vaccine was effective at stopping you from getting and spreading COVID. Lie after lie after lie. That was the center of government policy, and the censorship industrial complex, the whole censorship machine that the Biden administration used was designed to cement in place those crazy policies. All the harm that came from those policies might have been avoided had we allowed to have free speech in those critical moments in 2020 and 2021.
Well, I'd like to bring up a couple of comments here and get your reaction to this. In response to Zuckerberg's letter that is continuing to make all the waves it is, the White House issued a statement of their own. And I'd like to get your response to some of this. First of all, they said, quote, when confronted with a deadly pandemic, this administration encouraged responsible actions to protect public health and safety. Okay, your response to that.
The administration got nearly everything wrong. They kept schools closed for a full year longer than our European counterparts, where there was already evidence that it was useless for controlling COVID and really deeply harmful to our kids. They enforced mask mandates when there was very little good evidence that they were going to be effective, and divided the population on the basis of that. They imposed vaccine mandates where millions of people, 1 million people lost their jobs over vaccine mandates, really changed the way the working class connected with public health, damaging vaccine confidence. The White House statement has it exactly backwards. They got public health wrong, and they needed the censorship of scientific debate in order to create this illusion that they were right when they weren't. They were scared of speech. Just to put it really fast, just a really short way, free speech is good for health. And when you take away free speech, you get bad outcomes in health.
Yes, that's a strong point, because I mean, when the free speech was taken away, also some medications that were seemingly very helpful were taken away. That all of it became politicized. Here's another statement from the White House that I again like to get your reaction to. They said, quote, "Our position has been clear and consistent. We believe tech companies and other private actors should take into account the effects their actions have on the American people while making independent choices about the information they present," end quote. All right, it sounds to me like the White House is saying that the Biden administration really knows what's better, and that they had to step in because they know. Did they know what's best? Even for that matter, did the big tech know what's best?
No, I mean, no. The answer is no to both those questions, Jody. But the thing is that is such a deceptive little piece of propaganda there. What they're saying is that the Twitter and Facebook and all that should make responsible judgments what belongs online, what doesn't belong online. To some extent, that's fine. Of course, they shouldn't have child porn and other kind of illegal material online. That's completely legitimate that would be restricted. But they are under a law called the Communication Decencies Act. Section 230 of that act basically says that they can't act as editors, that they're essentially a conduit for free speech. And if they act like editors, then they're liable for all the slander or whatever it gets said on their platforms. What the White House is saying is that you should act like an editor, and put them really in a conundrum. If they act like an editor, then all of a sudden they're liable for all the terrible stuff that they post that are lies. Just it's online, so that you're going to have some of that. If they don't act like an editor, if they act like a free speech platform, then they get absolutely hammered by the White House. It wasn't voluntary action by the White House that led to these restrictions. It was pressure by the White House. A federal judge looking at this evidence made an analogy to Al Capone, with Biden administration and the Al Capone role coming to the Facebook and Twitter saying, "Look, that's a nice business you got there. It would be nasty if something were to happen to it." Wow.
Yeah, a little hint, hint, wink, wink. You better do as you're told, or else. There were so many areas that was deceptive, misguiding, outright wrong. But one set of voices that was shut down in the midst of all these others we're talking about was the origins of COVID. And I mean, you couldn't, no one could talk about where this came from. How does that fit into the White House's claim that they were somehow doing everything they could to protect public safety and health?
Okay, so the thing about COVID origins, the people who had an interest in suppressing it were actually a relatively small group of very powerful scientists, including Tony Fauci, because the allegation essentially is that Tony Fauci and the NIH funded the kind of research in Wuhan that very likely caused the pandemic, leading to the deaths of millions and trillions of dollars spent on the damage caused by the lockdowns, school closures, all this harm. If it's true that this funding, this decision to fund dangerous research really led to the pandemic, well, that's going to damage the reputations of Tony Fauci and others in the scientific community that would participate in it forever. And so if you look at the early days of the pandemic, January 2020, those folks spent the early days trying to cover up the possibility of a lab leak. And they deployed their resources and power within the media and in social media to try to make it seem as if the lab leak idea was a conspiracy, that if you were somehow racist against the Chinese if you believed in the lab leak. And it wasn't a conspiracy. It was a real theory, a reality, and very likely true that the United States funded the Wuhan lab that very likely did the dangerous research that led to the pandemic. That's true. That's 100% true. It's documented and true that what I just said. It was a reputational protection of a very small number of very powerful scientific bureaucrats that was at stake here. And it's striking to me that to this day you still have a full political party, the Democratic Party, trying to protect the reputation of Tony Fauci. And I don't understand it. It's not a partisan thing. It's just a human thing.
Yeah, I mean, hearing what you're talking about, it just, to me, it demands more investigation. There has to be more than just protect a reputation. At least you would think so. All right, so let's go back to Zuckerberg here and the letter he sent. How does this letter potentially affect the court case that you're a part of?
Well, actually, the court case, the discovery in that court case had found almost everything that's in the letter. In fact, the federal judges in the lower court, the appeals court, all looked at this evidentiary record that we developed in this Missouri versus Biden case and issued a preliminary injunction ordering the Biden administration to stop censoring social media content and basically to stop contacting social media companies with the purpose of censoring. The case went to the Supreme Court where we lost on standing, which means that apparently what the Supreme Court requires is an email from a government hack down to a social media company saying, censor J. We don't have such emails. What we have is the White House emails the social media companies saying, censor ideas sort of like this, which is the kind of ideas I would say. And in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that we don't have standing because the government was censoring ideas, not people. So the case went back down to the lower court. We don't no longer have the preliminary injunction in place, but we're going to get a chance to prove that we do actually have standing. As things stand, actually, I'm sorry to say, Jody, the First Amendment is a dead letter in the United States. If the government can go and censor ideas on social media without anybody having standing, well, what purpose does this First Amendment serve? It is an unenforceable dead letter. There is some action in Congress to sort of fix this loophole, but the Supreme Court really messed up here. And the Biden administration, it's the worst administration on free speech in American history.
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
John Adams is worse.
Where do ideas come from? What do people embrace if it's not ideas? I mean, how do you separate ideas from people and thereby judicially separate ideas from those who have standing? Unbelievable. Listen, our time is rapidly getting away from us, and I hate that. But you were one of the authors of the Great Barrington Declaration. Wouldn't our nation have benefited tremendously from considering even some of what you were proposing and others?
I mean, I can
and
make
yet
a
you were
theoretical
silenced.
argument.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was silent. I mean, I can make a theoretical argument about Jody, but it's very, very simple. Look what happened in Sweden. Sweden did not lock down. They didn't close schools for kids under 16. They had voluntary measures to try to protect vulnerable older people. They made some mistakes early in the pandemic, but by and large, what happened is that they protected human life better than any other country in Europe. Better than the United States, better than Canada, better than any country in South America. The Swedish approach, which is very close in spirit to the Great Barrington Declaration, which is protect the vulnerable older people who are at most at risk, but then allow the rest of society to go on without draconian measures and futile measures to try to suppress the spread of it. That protects human life best. And that's what we found in Sweden. Even from the United States, you can see Florida had lower all-cause excess deaths since the start of the pandemic than California has. I mean,
and they had the senior population.
Yeah, even if you do the age adjustment, I mean, the key thing is the lockdowns were harmful. The lockdowns killed, and they did not protect human life against COVID.
Well, listen, I wish we could talk more. I'd like to know what your thoughts are. What are other issues that science is, that experts' voices need to be heard that are not being heard right now? How confident are you that we've learned lessons from the past? I only got about 30 seconds. Do you want to reply, or let's just save it for next time?
I mean, no. Well, I mean, just very quickly, the COVID pandemic pointed to very, very severe problems in the way we manage public health, the way we manage and fund science. The key thing is we need radical transparency, and we need checks and balances on public health,
Absolutely.
and we need decentralization. Basic American ideas have to be restored to restore public health to where it should be.
Dr. J. Bhattacharya, thank you so much.